My name is Brandon Bora. I'm the president of Real. Thank you all for coming to this Indy-Built on Sport event. Yep, thank you. Yeah, that's fair. Obviously, first I'd like to thank the panelists. Obviously very busy, taking out time out of their day, sacrificing to be able to have this type of event. So let's give them a round of applause. Also really want to thank Helium for allowing us to utilize this venue. They've only been open a few weeks, and for us to be able to use such a great venue, we're very grateful for this opportunity, so thank you to them as well. Speaking of Helium, afterwards at 8 o'clock, Steve Razanizzi from FXX The League at 8 o'clock will be performing, so if you want to stay around for that, go to Janelle at the front desk, let her know that you are part of Real, and that she'll give you a $20 discounted ticket, so that's an opportunity as well. On May 15th, Indy Chamber, Catherine Eselman is going to be doing an event here as well at 6 o'clock called Buy In. It's going to be about revitalizing retail strategies here in Indianapolis. So it's just an event that you might want to take a look at. For those of you who don't know what Real is, Real stands for Real Estate Ascending Leaders. It was created basically to provide a platform for us to cross-collaborate amongst the different commercial real estate sectors, whether it be hospitality, multifamily, retail, office, as well as the different disciplines such as lenders, architects, constructions, in order to build developments that positively impact our community. Further, we're really focusing on different ways to provide education, content, whether it be through our social media presence as well as on our online. We have a forum that we're calling our Deal Den, which we're hoping we can put some real-time information to be able to get deals done fast and efficiently. Speaking of social media, if you do take any pictures or videos, if you could please tag us on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook, we'd really appreciate it. And without further ado, Brian Bondis, our membership chair, will be introducing our panelists. So thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming here today. Thank you again for the panelists. When the Indy-Real board and I started talking last fall about this idea of doing a sports-related event here in downtown Indianapolis, number one, I was super excited. And number two, it got me thinking about two stories I had the privilege of doing in my past life as a TV news reporter for Fox 59 and CBS 4. They're both about this guy. This is former Indianapolis Mayor Bill Hudnut. There you see him doing the Hudnut hook. It was an anti-litter campaign. So I did two stories. One was for his the day he died, and then 2 weeks later for his funeral. This was late 2016. TV news was going well for me at the time, but I was considering different options. I was looking at tech sales and commercial real estate and didn't really know which one of the two that I really wanted to pursue. But when I did research about him, and after covering all of what the Indiana and Indianapolis leaders said about him during his funeral, there was a quote that still to this day sticks with me. And that is what Bill Hudnut wanted his epitaph to read. He built well and cared about people. Those three words, that he built well, I think often we get, as commercial real estate professionals, whether you're an engineer, architect, broker, developer, attorney, sometimes we get lost in the day-to-day hustle and bustle of what we do and forget about how we have the ability to impact the communities we live in for the better. Whether that be create better places for people to live, work, grow their businesses, build a sports franchise, you name it. So we will get back to more on Bill Hudnut's contributions to Indianapolis. But I first want to tell you about another visionary who helped shape downtown Indianapolis. This photo is from the 1968 Indianapolis 500. A famous sports writer at the time, Jim Murray, came in from Los Angeles, and he described Indianapolis as a racetrack with a cornfield around it. Often people describe downtown as Dolesville. A lot of people would come down here for work, maybe the department store, but there wasn't a lot of entertainment venues or places that you would go out to eat downtown. Now this was taken in the same year. This is former senator and Indianapolis mayor Richard Lugar. Here he's looking out of the city-county building to what I believe today is the Regent's Tower. Now he had this overarching vision that he wanted to revitalize Indianapolis' downtown. He wanted a reason for people to come here besides just during the workday. Now at this same time, there's this team called the Indiana Pacers who are currently in the ABA. They're playing at the state fairgrounds. That facility is deteriorating to the point that the Indiana Boys High School State Basketball Championships were beginning to be played in Bloomington. This is Indiana, folks. In 49 states, it's just basketball. So needless to say, the people in Indianapolis did not like that. To fix the problem, Richard Lugar came up with this idea to make sports an economic development generator. Fast forward 6 years later, and we've got Market Square Arena. Indiana Pacers start playing there. They're still in the ABA. The ABA is deteriorating as well, and only a handful of teams were going to be able to join the NBA. So at this point, in '74, they're playing the ABA Pacers in Market Square Arena. They still needed some help. Cue 1976. This is Bill Hudnut during one of the St. Patrick's Day parades. Obviously, you can see he was Gregorious smile, as one of my former coworkers described it. A lot of people called him larger than life. His term as mayor was defined by his contributions to the business, development, and sports areas. He helped the Pacers become an NBA team shortly into his term, and then he set his sights on a little bit of a larger project. This is Bill Hudnut in front of what we all know as the RCA Dome. Late in his first term, 1979, Bill Hudnut comes up with this revolutionary idea. He decides to create the Indiana Sports Corp. In 1979, this is the first sports corp in the nation, possibly the world. An agency geared, designed with its sole purpose to bring sporting events to a city and community. Hudnut with the RCA Dome, the Indiana Sports Corp's first task was to do a feasibility study of a downtown stadium. He believed that would help grow the convention center business and eventually create what we know as the amateur sports capital of the world. So in 1979, the Indianapolis does not have an NFL team, but Hudnut wanted a stadium. So he sold it to city leaders and some of the decision makers in the community that this would be a way to grow the convention center business. But everybody knows we need a NFL team to really make the investment make sense. If you have the time, I highly suggest you Google the Baltimore Colts coming to Indianapolis. I'm going to give you the SparkNote version and fast forward to the very, very end. March 27th, the Maryland State Legislature the Senate passes a law that if the Baltimore Colts leave, they will take the team via eminent domain. That next morning, Indianapolis Mayor Bill Hudnut hits up his buddy who owns Mayflower Trucking, sends 15 trucks up to Baltimore. They get there at 10 o'clock, spend all night packing. 8 o'clock, they leave in 15 different routes because the Baltimore state troopers were planning to set up roadblocks to stop them leaving the state. So, needless to say, they get out. Later that day, the House passes the bill and the governor signs it. And Indiana state troopers were at the state lines welcoming the Mayflower trucks, and Hudnut got his football team. He could describe the day as one of the greatest days in the history of the city. Hudnut went on to sponsor, organize $4 billion of development. You've got the IUPUI Natatorium, the Pan Am Plaza, which brought the Pan Am Games, as well as Circle Center Mall. Obviously, the momentum has continued with new additions such as Bankers Life Fieldhouse and Lucas Oil Stadium. And the message that I hope you leave with today, not only one, he built well and cared about people, and number two, I found a Quote from our panelist Rick Fuson in 2017, had the folks in Indianapolis 40 plus years ago not decided that sports were a good economic development generator, a lot of things would have been the same. That is
great word.
Excuse me. All right, now we are going to introduce some panelists. I'm going to introduce each one, ask them a question, and then move on to the next. After that is complete, we will open it up to the audience. So please start thinking about questions. And without further ado, Mr. Rick Fuson, I've had the pleasure of knowing for 15 plus years now. He is an Indianapolis boy. His father was a sports editor for the Indianapolis Star, graduated Arlington High School, played college football at IU for a couple of years, and even scored a touchdown or two, I hear. At age 31, he joined the Indiana Pacers as the director of special events. This was 1984. He was 31 years old. His first big task, kind of coming full circle in 1985, was to be in charge of the All-Star game at the RCA Dome. Jim Morris and the Simons recognized his leadership ability and ability to put on large sporting events very efficiently. That year he was promoted to the executive director of Market Square Arena. He's a life member of the Indiana Sports Corps, and his reputation is known internationally for his ability to put on events. When you consider the Pan Am Games, that he was in charge of the closing ceremonies. He also co-chaired the 2012 Super Bowl Village Committee. That Super Bowl Village has now become a staple at any city that holds that event, and it was created here in Indianapolis. So Rick, thank you for joining us. As the elder, give him a round of applause.
Give Brian a round of applause because he's finally passing it to somebody else. But go ahead.
So as the elder of our panel,
I'm not the elder in the room. I'm just the elder of the panel.
as the elder of the panel, I gave a little snapshot of some of the risk and things that took place in the 70s and 80s to get us where we are today. Give us a little bit of those times and since through your lens.
Sure, thank you, and good day to you all. Glad to be here. It's an honor to be as part of this group, especially in this place that I don't think would have been here today had we not had the history that we've had in terms of the mall and all kind of different things. But we can talk about that if you're interested going forward with your questions. But I think really the whole strategy of downtown Indianapolis, really, I'm going to take it one step back from Dick Lugar and go to Mayor John Barton, who in 1965 really pushed the issue with the Indiana State Legislature to create the Capital Improvements Board. And the Capital Improvements Board is the municipal corporation that owns Bankers Life Fieldhouse and runs the convention center and runs Lucas Oil Stadium and owns Victory Field and a number of other situations that certainly my friend down here on the left can talk more about as he worked for the mayor and the city council. But really, that's as much as anything, I think that's when it started. And Jim Morris, who's our vice chair, who has been around in the days that he was since he was the chief of staff for Dick Lugar in mayor's office. Really will give John Barton credit for creating the CIB, which Jim will say, and I believe he's really right, is probably the most important development in downtown Indianapolis in the last 50 years. There's no question about that, because it was created as a development group who would look forward thinking, who had taxing authority as it relates to all kind of different situations, whether they be user taxes, etc. And today, you are still looking what the CIB is doing in terms of looking at the future, in terms of downtown hotels, keeping the Pacers here for many, many years, looking at the new soccer stadium to my friend at the left, etc. And making sure that we are looking forward. And I think that's really when it started. And then Dick Lugar, as he came in, Dick really was upset about the Indiana High School Athletic Association going to places like Bloomington. and that we really didn't have a gym that we could play in downtown Indianapolis, and so Market Square Arena was built. Interestingly enough, Market Square Arena, Jim Morris will say, and I'll refer to Jim Morris a lot because Jim Morris, while he was never an elected official, he is one of the pillars of today's Indianapolis. And without a guy like Jim Morris, who had the foresight to be a good staff person, who could help make things happen at all kind of different levels, we wouldn't be here today either. But Jim will tell you that Dick Lugar said to him, "We have $16 million, and much of it from a federal grant, to build Market Square Arena." My friend Herb Simon, who I've worked for 35 years, was here then too, but just a few years ago, we made a decision to buy a scoreboard that was $16 million. That's how much it's changed over the years. Built Market Square Arena for $16 million in the early 1970s, and we bought a scoreboard in the 2000s for $16 million. That's how much it's changed. But all those things are important. And the Market Square Arena situation led then to the Pacers coming downtown. The Pacers were really started on a shoestring by some 6 great gentlemen who started the Pacers. They pooled their money together in 1967. They got in the ABA. We had some great rivalries with Kentucky Colonels, a number of other groups, but they really wanted to be in the NBA. And so when it came the opportunity in 1976, and interestingly enough, the NBA tried to swallow up the ABA as early as 1970, but there was a lawsuit by the Players Association, actually led by Oscar Robertson from Indianapolis, one of the greatest players of all time in any part of basketball. But there was a suit that stopped it based on it being antitrust. And so until 1976, that stopped. But in 1976, the laws changed, and they could bring some teams from the ABA into the NBA. The Pacers were one of the 4 teams that got into the NBA, but there's a price to pay. It cost $3.2 million to get into the NBA. Plus, we had to give away 1/7 of our television revenue in perpetuity. Now that's changed a little bit because we've been able to get through that, but we still have to account for 1/7 of our television revenue to pay back the gentleman who owned the St. Louis Spirits, and his family has made hundreds of millions of dollars since 1976 in the 4 teams that went into the NBA, and the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that they got from the TV rights. So the Pacers at that point, they still were having some financial difficulties. So in 1977, none of you were born yet other than my friend Denny Sutherland and one other gentleman from Brazil. But maybe we were barely still in diapers? Okay, I thought you were. Yeah, I didn't think you were. And he served a mayor, and he's elected official, whatever else. So the bottom line that they had to pay all this money to get into the NBA, and we're still paying it today. But the Pacers still had financial trouble, and a guy named Bobby Leonard, who is timeless. Bobby Leonard is timeless. If you listen to the radio ever, maybe you don't listen to the radio, maybe you listen to a rebroadcast, or maybe you listen on streaming or whatever else the case may be. But Bobby Leonard and his wife Nancy were part of the team at that point, coach and general manager, and they saved the team by having a telethon. And we raised enough money for 8,000 tickets, and the Pacers were saved. And then they went on from there, and then Herb and Mel Simon bought them in 1983-84 season, and they've been the longest. They are the longest standing. Herb's the longest standing owner in the NBA. A long way to get to the fact that sports, which really began its beginnings in the mid-1960s, really pushed then by Dick Lugar, has become an economic generator. The Pacers alone, in terms of our last study that we did with Indiana University Public Policy Institute, account for about $370 million a year in terms of economic impact, 4,000 jobs. We do business with purveyors in 52 of the 92 counties. We have ticket holders in all 92 counties. About 68% of our revenue, interestingly enough, 68% of our revenue comes from out of state. So that's really a good economic generator. And you just add the Pacers to what the Colts do, what the 11 does, what Indiana Sports Corporation does, and maybe Ryan will talk about this more, but there's 80,000 people now that work in the hospitality industry, which is sports and the convention business, whatever the case may be. I think $4 billion, I think, on your studies. And so it's a huge economic generator, and it was really started in the 1960s because a group of people, men and women both, in Indianapolis, wanted their city to be something other than what they saw it was at that time. Not that it was a bad place. They were raising their children. We had a downtown, and it was really a great place. As my parents would say, it was a great place to be. But we took it to the next generation and a generation after that because of sports. And I really believe, I honestly believe, and some may think this is arrogant, but had the Pacers not stayed here, we might not be here today. Herb and Mel might have not bought them. We might not have them all under Bill Hudnut. We might not have anything that we have downtown. We might not have the Colts here. Ersal would not be in a position where he's trying to build a team for the future in terms of soccer. The Indianapolis 500 probably would be here because they have been a staple for over 100 years. But we still might be what Jim Murray called us, was a cornfield with a racetrack around it. And because of the sports situation, I think we've been able to get 16 Tech here. We've been able to Eli Lilly certainly has been a wonderful company, but would we have Emphasis, or would we have Salesforce, or would we have some of the other companies that come in here had we not had the sports situation? I don't believe we would have. And would we still have the Symphony had we not been able to grow, had been able to not economically grow in terms of sports and the other things? Maybe not. Can't say 100%. I think the arts continue to grow, sports continues to grow, our businesses continue to grow, and really Indianapolis, because of its sports situation, really becomes the biggest neighborhood, the strongest economic generator of any place in the state. So that may be a little more history lesson, maybe more than you wanted, but I wanted to talk as long as Ersal has because he's got 4 pages of notes. So back to you. Thank you.
Rick, in a couple of years, people are going to be crediting you with a lot of the growth for the Pacers and things you've done. So
I just want to say something about that. All you young people out there, it is imperative, I plead with you to get involved. I'm glad you're here tonight because we can't continue the vitality of our city without the next generation and the generation after that becoming involved. You don't have to go to every event, but support the 11 and support the Big Ten and support the Pacers and the Colts and the Indians and support the IRT and whatever else, because of groups like that, we continue to have a great place to live. And so I plead with you to be part of it, to volunteer, and continue to make our city better. So thanks.
Thank you. Our next panelist, you guys in the audience may have seen him lately. He's been in the news just a little bit. Ersal Ozdemir. He is the owner of Indy-11 as well as the president and CEO of Keystone Group, which is comprised of Keystone Realty Group and Keystone Construction. Some of Ersal's developments that you may recognize: the Intercontinental Hotel, Sophia Square and Olivia and Carmel, and he's currently redeveloping 220 North Meridian Tower into a mixed-use development that will include retail, parking, as well as office spaces here downtown. So Ersal, we're going to cut right to the chase. Got a little project in the works. 1, where do you see that stand? 2, how do you see it playing a role and maybe in Indianapolis's future? And finally, are there any parallels that you can draw between your professional soccer team and some of the things that the Pacers went through during the mid-'70s?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, especially with my good friends Rick and Ryan. They're not only leaders in sports, but also great leaders of our state. So it's an honor to be here, especially, it's always when I go to these events, speak, everybody sits in the back. So I can't see anybody in the back, way back, but it's great to see so many people here in this special new place in downtown. I'm an engineer, Purdue guy in real estate development, now in construction, as well as sports. But as Rick mentioned, really, there wouldn't be a lot of things that would be here without the strategy of the future past leaders, create the CIB and then Sports Corp, which is was the first and the premier sports organization in the state, and as well as obviously building a new venue with the vision to move Pacers, which allowed them able to compete for NBA franchise, then bringing Colts to do. So I moved here late 90s, and one reason was I was really surprised as a Purdue person. Growing up in Turkey, I never thought that I would ever live in Indiana. The only really thing I knew about Indiana, not the race everybody thinks, in my opinion, with all the Pacers is more well known globally than the races. We do follow Formula One around the world, but I played growing up soccer. Yeah, that was my main sport. I tried to play basketball, but the basketball coach thought I wasn't as good as basketball player as soccer, so he put me into soccer. But I really, I wasn't a Pacers fan back then. I was a Chicago Bulls. It was Michael Jordan. He was a big player globally. But when I moved here, I became Indiana Pacers fan, obviously. But it was really, when you go back and look at really all these developments as you put it together, Brian and Rick mentioned that there's so many people that have helped to bring us where we are today. And as I think Jim Morris said, rightfully recently, that they helped to build the really last 50 years of the city. We wouldn't be without people like Jim Morris and a few other key leaders that helped us to do. And we're hoping to help to shape the future of that. And as Rick mentioned, it's really important for us to get engaged. So one reason I moved here, because I was very surprised, as the United States is the most powerful country in the world. We were at that time 11th largest city. I was shocked that this was the 11th largest city of the most popular country in the world. So I thought there will be some opportunities. And our first project, was one of our first projects downtown was the redevelopment of former Jillian's building. We co-owned that, co-developed that, and renovated that to condos. This is 2002, if you remember, so most of you may not, but there weren't a lot of residential down there. We were the second condo building developed, and mainly because Indiana Pacers just moved a half a block down the street, and Georgia Street was starting to happen. There were several bars opened up just south of us. There were no Kilroys and stuff. There were several before that. So it was obviously important corner, which is across the street, and we bought that building, built 1911. It converted 20 luxury condos. At that time, didn't exist. Then the condos across the street, and many more would come. And I'll give you one example. I don't think I told Rick that, but we had still a very younger neurosurgeon back then. He's now been around longer. He bought a condo, I remember, on the 6th floor, unit 603. He doesn't live there anymore. He's married with kids. But one reason actually he moved to the building, I'm not exaggerating because we built all these condos. One of his, at that time, blinds at Pacers, one of them at Colts. And he worked all the time as a young neurosurgeon at IU Methodist. And he said, I only have little time. He will go to Pacer games and Colts games at that time. This is up to 3 years when there. So I personally have seen the benefits as a Keystone Group development, construction-wise, all the sports team have done. I truly believe that there will not be downtown Indianapolis without the sports strategy that is built around Sports Corp, then our professional team Pacers, then Colts, Indians, and as well as all events Sports Corp does with the partnership with other teams in town to do. So our goal is to build on that, and I felt like what can we do to help on that as a soccer fan, as part of the global fabric. I thought, well, the world's most popular game is soccer. It's great to have two major teams, NBA, NFL, great AAA baseball team. But for us to be sustainable, maybe this was good 30 years ago to have these two major great teams, but every other city, every major city, plus now secondary, they're having professional soccer teams. When I called 2006 MLS, there were 10 teams and the franchise was $10 million. This league didn't even exist. This league is only 8 years old. When we joined this secondary tier, there were only 8 teams. As of now, there are 36 professional teams in this league. There's another league below us, professional. There's another minor league below that, and the major league now has 27 teams with franchise values over $150 million. So you can see the progress, and our goal was, we're not one of the largest cities in the country. We don't grow as fast. We're a great city. When people come here, visit, they realize how great it is, how great downtown is, but a lot of the times we elevate the status of the state and city by our professional teams. And I use this all the time, that how much would you have to pay to televise city and state on national TV, international TV, when Patience plays or Colts plays? You can't pay that to buy that. I don't think we put a value on doing that. Or when we play, some of our games are international televised. What's the value of actually promoting the city when you carry the name of the city or the state to be able to do that? So for us, it's really important to continue invest in the city and the state, as well as build infrastructure, create a quality of place, as everybody talks about, to make sure that not only we're able to retain, great talent like yourself here in the room, but also able to attract people not only around the country, but around the world, as we have some great national and international companies now either headquartered here or they have large operations in Indianapolis. So with that said, our goal, our plan this time is 11 Park. It's a neighborhood transformational project. It's not a stadium anymore. It's a $400 million mixed-use development that is centered by a $150 million soccer stadium. We'll have apartments, office building, one boutique hotel, and retail shops on the first floor of these locations. And the project, we have a bill. We're part of a bill in the state, SB 7. If that's successful, it will allow us to work with the city to take a part of the city that is currently does not generate property taxes or sales tax, income tax, or any jobs, and use some of the increment that we would generate with the developer backbones to privately develop and own the real estate, but publicly to help to build publicly owned stadium for the soccer, to make sure that we secure the future of soccer in Indianapolis for years to come. I'm going to stop from at this point.
Hey, thank you. We're all rooting for you. Our final panelist for this session is the Indiana Sports Corps president, Ryan Vaughn. Ryan and I communicated a little bit back in my former life when Indianapolis was, I think it was one of the top 40 teams to try to host a World Cup game if the United States got it. I didn't get to do the story, and then we didn't make the top 25. But needless to say, I got to know a lot more about Ryan and was blown away by this guy's resume. An attorney by trade, a former deputy prosecutor. In 2007, a Republican seat opened up on the City County Council. Ryan, at 27 years old, was the only person to run, and he won. And congratulations. He came in as the youngest member of the minority party on the county council. That next year, he ran again for a Republican seat in the county council. He was elected and quickly became the most veteran member of the city county council's majority party. He did that for 4 years as the president of the city county council, and then in 2012, he became Mayor Ballard's chief of staff. In 2015, Ryan was asked to run the Indiana Sports Corp as the sixth leader since 1979. As Ryan and I were getting to know each other a little bit better, he was telling me as he took on that job, obviously he's been the president of the City County Council, he's been a chief of staff, but as we've learned today, our economy and Indianapolis relies on sports. So he had a lot of pressure on him. And Jim Morris, who we heard a little bit about earlier, said these words to Ryan. He goes, "It was way easier to build this than it will be to keep it going." Flash forward, 4 years, and this is the lineup that Ryan's put together coming up. Big Ten football championship, NBA All-Star game, NCAA Final Four, Indy 500, another Big Ten football championship, the college football championship, and a big men's basketball tournament. Ryan, my question for you, how do you do it? And then how can all of us help you keep this momentum going for decades to come?
Well, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Just to most directly and most importantly answer your question, I don't do it. We do it. And that, I think, if you leave with anything today, should be the most important part of what you take away. Because you can't bring these events to the city, you can't build these facilities, you can't promote Indianapolis or make the type of investments that these gentlemen were talking about unless the community is working together with the focus not selfishly on their own industries or their own professional sports, but on the city as a whole. And so one of the main reasons, if not the main reason I was very excited about this opportunity was not because I personally or the organization would be leading or taking credit for attracting these major events. It's because the mission of the Indiana Sports Corp is to advance and inspire our community through sports, and that whole entire effort is built on partnerships. So that's a great slide, and I'm very excited about all of these events are coming to town, but we would not have the NBA All-Star Game but for the leadership of the Simon family and Rick and the Pacers. We would not have the College Football Playoff Championship but for the investment we made in Lucas Oil Stadium. We would not have multiple NCAA Final Fours had it not been for city civic leadership coming together to make a significant investment in attracting the NCAA to relocate to Indianapolis during a competitive process. And so while the Sports Corp, my friends here have been very kind to sort of highlight our mission, what we really are is we try to function as a convener and we try to focus our energy and efforts on making the city better. And that's been, I think, the most rewarding part of this job. And candidly, it's been the political leadership's buy-in to that mission, regardless of party, over multiple decades. And it's been the civic leaders like Jim Morris, you heard Rick talk about, and a host of others who have stayed committed to that mission for over 40 years that has allowed us to continue to achieve over and over and over again. And so Jim's comments to me still ring true, that it will be as difficult, if not more, to sustain than it was to create. But as long as we keep that spirit of partnership and community forefront, I have a great deal of confidence that we'll continue to be able to do so.
Thank you so much. All right, that was a lot of awesome content, but it's very important to Indy Real to keep it open, a very community discussion. Who in the audience has a question for the panelist? Don't be shy. There you go.
I guess this question's for Rick and Ryan. How big is having the NBA All-Star Game in 2021 for the city and Pacers?
I'll repeat the question. The question was, how big is having the...
Like I can't hear it because I'm so old or what?
Here to help. Great question, by the way. The question is, how big is having the NBA All-Star Game for the city and for the Pacers? And I want to chime in one real quick. Part of the way we do it together, and Ryan sustains, some cities sent their NBA All-Star bid, FedEx, to the NBA's office. Rick, Larry Bird, all of them drove an Indy car down New York, the streets of New York, and presented it a little bit more grand of a fashion.
Yeah, let me just start with that. Nobody else has an Indy car other than Indianapolis, okay? And nobody else has Larry Bird other than Indiana. And to show you how important it was to us, we had Larry Bird come 3 blocks down Fifth Avenue in the daytime in Manhattan to deliver it to Adam Silver. Herb Simon, who was 84, bought the team with his brother in 83 and 84 season. We had the All-Star Game in 85. How important it is to him is he's in his second brother just died within the last 2 weeks. He is the last surviving brother. It is imperative for him that he wants to be here in 2021 for that game. So it is of utmost importance to the Pacers for us to have that game for Herb. And so you couldn't have anything more important than that. As it relates to the city, the NBA All-Star Game has an economic impact of over $100 million, as does the college championship. And so Anytime that you can, let's just say, hypothetically spend $10 million on an event and have $100 million or more of economic impact, I think any of you with the money that you have, put it in the bank today, would have a 10-to-1 return. So it's extremely important.
Yeah, I would echo that and maybe only complement it with some other points, which is that, at Sports Corp, our mission is really focused on delivering on 4 fronts. Economic vitality, putting Indianapolis on a national and international media stage in a positive light, creating civic pride through volunteerism and engagement, and then creating opportunities for our youth. So Rick spoke to the first. The second is really important. The NBA All-Star Game offers a really unique opportunity to put Indy's brand global. Basketball is a lot different in the NBA than it was when Rick first started hosting the All-Star Game in 1985. It is a global business now. Having just come from Charlotte with Rick and the Pacers, I'm ballparking here. I bet a third of the All-Stars are not from the United States of America, and their followings are significant. And so it is an unbelievably unique opportunity for Indianapolis to further its brand around sports and being a global city that frankly isn't offered when we host a lot of, say, collegiate or domestic Olympic events. So that's really special. The second is, and the Pacers deserve a ton of credit for this, is that fourth prong about having positive impact in our community around youth. And so just to give you a picture of how focused we are in differentiating ourselves from other cities across the country when it comes to hosting these events. The NBA All-Star Game, the NBA has its NBA Cares program, which is a sort of community impact program, but no other city has any kind of legacy initiative that's going to leave an impact like this game will. I would start telling you exactly what I think those plans are going to be, but he'd throw the microphone at me because there's not a press conference or an announcement scheduled yet. But I know that you will be impressed by the effort the Pacers go to and the community goes to make sure that when the NBA game is in town, the All-Star game is in town, not only are we getting that global exposure, not only are we getting that $100 million impact, not only are we inviting the community into this event in a way that wouldn't happen in other cities, but there will be a legacy impact for the youth statewide, not just in Indianapolis, statewide, that will be meaningful for years to come. And so those are the kind of things that I find very exciting and why this particular opportunity is special for us.
And let me just add, if I can, thank you, that this is sports attaching themselves to crocheting and knitting. For those of you who haven't seen this, we announced a few weeks ago, the Super Bowl during 2012 made about 13,000 scarves. People from around the country, really around the world, made scarves to embrace our weather. His scarf. He wanted to get his scarf on, so he got his scarf on. And he says he has a summer scarf, by the way, as well. I can't wait to see that. But we announced a thing not too long ago called Nothing But Knit, in the vein of Nothing But Net, in terms of making beanies for all the volunteers and all-stars and whatever else when they come in 2021. So that's the kind of fun things we do. He talks about youth, and we talk about all the connections that we have. That's just another fun thing that comes as it relates to these sporting events.
All right, time for one or two more questions.
You guys have all obviously done an incredible job developing the city. Ryan, you kind of touched on the sense of community. Do you think that sense of community focus versus kind of the rat race mentality that's in other cities, do you think over a long period of time into the future that that's going to benefit and help grow Indy larger than some of these cities? Or do you think that Indy's kind of its own special niche and will continue to grow, but that's kind of our sweet spot? Or do you think, got kind of just your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll echo Rick's comments from earlier, and the answer to that question is really up to you. And what I mean by that is it is candidly easier to be collaborative and work jointly when you're smaller. And as we've continued to grow and we've seen evolutions in leadership, we've seen growth of new companies, we've seen folks migrate to our city from other cities. We have reaped the benefit of economic growth. We've reaped the benefit of diversity in our community. But carrying that spirit forward is really in the hands of everyone in this room. This does not come easy. this is hard work. Giving up your free time, sacrificing time with your families, committing your corporations and your small businesses to support these missions. If that doesn't happen, we will not continue on the pace that we have had. And that's a difficult story. You know, to be very frank, you know, the Sports Corp was founded in 1979. I was founded in 1978, right? So I have grown up in a city that has always enjoyed a rich and robust sports history. That wasn't always the case. And so what happens to folks my age and younger is that we tend to take that for granted. We don't appreciate the work that is necessary to go into sustaining and growing that. And part of my job is to constantly beat that drum, which is to say, do not take your foot off the gas. Do not lose focus on what makes us special. Commit civically, commit financially, and you'll continue to see the evolution of your city in the way that it has over the last 30 years. Let off that gas, become isolated and focused on your own sort of, not your own, but your own business needs or whatever, without that intense civic mind, and you'll feel that result. And so I don't mean to sort of put it back on you, but I do want to impress upon everyone that I do think that there is a bright future for Indianapolis. I do think we have a unique culture of collaboration that doesn't exist in a lot of major cities. Here I am, a guy, raised by a single mom and two, never involved politically, didn't come from a family that ever went to college, given exceptionally unique opportunities just because I engaged and worked hard and have had a great experience. That's the kind of community we have. But people have to continue to commit like that in order for us to be successful. And so if the takeaway is nothing else from this, it's double down, get engaged, own a part of this, support the 11, support the Pacers, the Colts, what have you, and be a part of this success. So I see Rick and I have known each other for a long time, long before I got involved in sports. And part of the reasons that I consider him a friend and a mentor is I've heard him talk about and see the personal pride he has in being part of that narrative over the last 30 plus years. And I want that for myself, and I hope that you want that for you. And if you do, we'll be twice as good today as we are now.
We have another great panel, so we're going to end it on that note. But one final thing, when the Sports Corps was started in 1979, there was one Sports Corps. Ryan is now competing against 500 plus across the nation, and that's what he came up with. So thank you all. All right, as we exchange the panelists, I am going to invite Indy Reel's sponsorship director, Courtney Gallion, to introduce our next group of speakers. Courtney was instrumental in coming up with this event, and he's going to take it from here.
Hey, Brian. We need this up.
So my name is Courtney Gallion. I'm with CBRE and a co-founder of Reel, and I promise I won't talk as long as Brian. So I'll try to make this swift and to the point. But Einstein once said the eighth wonder of the world was compound interest, and applying that to everything we just heard on the panel a few minutes ago, this entire city has been built upon sports over the past 40 years, which has only compounded in the returns. And everybody in this room, for the most part, is involved to some degree in the real estate profession. We've had the luxury of benefiting from, much of what the pro sports have done here in the city. Michael Crafton, for example, who's in the room, he and his partner Bob Court, who are planning on opening a new restaurant just down the street from the Bank of Life Fieldhouse. I mean, that's huge economic impact for, on an individual basis, all the way up to Salesforce Tower and many other developments that have prospered throughout the city. So this event kind of came to fruition. I was driving 5 in the morning to ICSE in Columbus, and listen to podcasts, trying to think of new, creative, and innovative ways to introduce a new product through real. And all of a sudden it dawned on me that we've got a great city with great sports, great entertainment, and there's a huge there's a huge real estate component to that. You know, for the most part, sports and real estate are synonymous with one another in the city. We've got some of the largest real estate developers in the entire country. You know, Simon, Kite, you know, Thompson Thrift, you know, a number of others, Ersal and Keystone, you know, some of the largest in the country, in fact, some of the largest in the world, who also happen to own professional sports teams. So that's kind of how this whole thing kind of came to fruition. So with that, I'd like to make an introduction to our panelists, and I'll turn it back over to Brian. So to my left, we have Gary Brackett, who probably goes without much mention, but Gary is obviously a... Thank you. So Gary's got two professional lives. His former being a professional nine-year professional football player with the Indianapolis Colts, 2007 Super Bowl champion, defensive captain, and honestly, I went through your bio. Your accolades are extremely long. I don't even have time to list them, but obviously had a fantastic professional career and has transpired that into CEO and Chief Operating Officer of Stack Pickle and a number of other restaurant and investment endeavors. So we appreciate Gary taking the time. To his left, we have Fred Knipscheer, who is a local Fort Wayne Snyder grad. Fred is also a former pro hockey player. In 1993, he was drafted by the Boston Bruins, who then also played for the St. Louis Blues. Fred is the CFO and president of FK Restaurant Group, and is currently in negotiations on developing new restaurants in the new Hyatt, also the Yard with Thompson Thrift Project, and a number of other new and innovative restaurant concepts throughout the region and here locally. Last but not least is Brandon Gorin. I know Brandon on a very personal level as well. Brandon and I used to be business partners and also friends, currently still friends, but also business partners. Clarify that point. Brandon is locally raised, grew up in Muncie, went to Purdue University, four-year starter on the Purdue University's football team, and I think you graduated with a 4.0 in engineering. Close enough. Yeah, all right. So, and then was drafted into the NFL, played 9 seasons, has 2 Super Bowl championship rings with New England Patriots, unfortunately, but yeah. And has retired and currently is the owner, operator, and area developer for Marco's Pizza here in Indianapolis and the surrounding areas, with 20 operations underneath this belt currently, and potentially growing. So the point of having these panelists on, speak today and answer questions is to integrate them into the fabric of what we do professionally, and that is real estate. Without much of what they've done in our former panel, we probably wouldn't have a lot of the opportunity we have today. So with that, I'm going to turn back over to Brian.
Oh, yeah. Oh. I found playing cards of all these fine young gentlemen, but we'll have to maybe next time. Gary, so if you grew up in Indy like me, I just always remember Gary Brackett as that all-star middle linebacker who was a beast. After Super Bowl champ. After doing some research, reading his bio, he was not like that growing up. Walk-on at Rutgers, undrafted, free agent, did not start his rookie year, and then as we know the rest. Gary, what did those experiences teach you about perseverance, and how have those lessons helped you grow the Stack Pickle?
Yeah, I think, first of all, thanks for putting on this event. I think great facility, so definitely looking forward to coming back. But definitely, I think the life lessons that I learned playing the game of football, I think are all transferable. And I think, obviously, being a walk-on in college, being like one day away from going home, I remember having my 1989 Honda Excel hatchback, full to the brim with everything I own. Having my parents just got their tuition bill and they could no longer afford for me to stay at Rutgers. So I had to go talk to the head coach and tell him that I was leaving. And out of the thin air, a scholarship appeared, and he rewarded me with a scholarship. And I think this next moment changed my life and really shaped my perspective on going to the NFL and doing what I'm doing now. So I go inside the weight room and I tell my friends, like, I get to stay. And I remember this one guy who was there, his name was Wesley Robertson. He was 6'3", 230 pounds, 5% body fat. But I would always say he looked like Tarzan and played like Jane, right? So very big, but didn't really play with the speed that you would think he should have. But he looked at me and he said, "Man, you got a scholarship. You should worry about starting." And it was that moment, that night, I went home and I didn't sleep at night. And I think we all have them, and there's those self-limiting beliefs that we put on ourselves that we're not good enough. And I think from that moment on, I convinced myself that I am good enough and I deserve to be wherever I'm at. So I just started working extremely hard. I ended up as a 2-year MVP of my college football team. I'm actually a Hall of Fame at Rutgers University. Came to the NFL, same formula, just worked hard, and good things happened. Third year, I was named captain. I was captain for the remainder of those 6 seasons. So when it was time to retire, I thought, I got hit in the head enough, so I thought the restaurant business was a good business. But I think, but really what it is that I feel like deep down in my core, my mom would always tell me that the greatest among us will serve. And I think restaurant is a great place to serve people, and it also is the ultimate team sport, right? So being in the sport of football and then being in the sport of restaurants, they're very similar. Funny story, so I was golfing, I was 31 years old, recently retired. I thought this was it, right? You retired, that's what the book says. So I'm retired. My wife is a physician, or I like to call her, she's my retirement plan. So she's working hard, 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week. And my son, who's 3 at the time, he looks at me and he says, "Daddy, like, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I was like, "What? Like, you see this house? You see this ring? What are you talking about when I grow up?" Oh boy, I might have shoved him, right, allegedly. But again, another one of those moments that change your life. And from that moment on, it's just like, I got so much more in me than just to retire. And you see some of the most successful people on the planet still working, right? And probably working harder. And what I realized is that, and they just talked about it in the panel previous to us, it's almost harder to sustain it than it is to create it. So for me now, just that mindset of, me versus me, right? I'm not in competition with anyone else. I just want to be the greatest me. I just want to have the greatest restaurants that we can have. I mean, better than we were yesterday. And that's what kind of drives me in doing what I'm doing now.
Thank you. So some of you may be new to Real. Brandon talked a little bit about the mission, but we feel like we have been very well received in our mission to connect different people that it takes to get a commercial real estate development deal done. Obviously, if you're playing that world, it takes a village. So with that, Fred, could you share the story you told me about the call you got shortly after this event? It's a example of Indy Real building connections, and then tell us a little bit about the 2 Pier 48s you plan to open.
Sure. You're talking about when Rick called me right now.
Yeah.
So shortly after Brian called me and asked me to be part of this great event, I got a call from Mr. Bondis's assistant asking to meet with me, and I was like, oh, it's like getting called into the principal's office. I'm sorry.
Fuson's assistant.
Yeah, Mr. Fuson, sorry.
Not there yet.
Yeah, and so it was pretty cool. So I got to go down and meet with Rick and his team, and I'd never met with him before, but it was great to see how excited he was about what we were doing with Pier 48 and our group, and being kind of new to the downtown community, and he couldn't have been happier. And what I was excited about was he kept asking me, what can they do? What can the Pacers do? What can he do to help us be successful? And I just thought that just kind of blew my mind.
Doesn't happen in other communities.
No, I would imagine. So that was pretty cool. It was a great day. I spent a couple hours with him, learned a lot about what's going on in the city. Some things I knew, some things I didn't. But just to have somebody like Rick to reach out and lend a hand and say, what can we do to help you and help you be successful was pretty cool. So really love that. And then to answer your second question, I'm originally actually from Boston, Mass, and moved here when I was 12 years old, moved to Fort Wayne when I was 12, and then got to go on and move on and play hockey, and was lucky enough to get a scholarship, and I was undrafted coming out of college. And when I went to college, it was similar to what Gary was saying. I was 5'9", 160 pounds when I got to college, and had no aspirations of playing professional hockey or anything like that. Just really didn't even think it was something that was attainable. And after a couple of years, I got a little bit bigger and ended up getting an opportunity to play with Team USA's junior national team, and went out for that and did really well, and thought, well, maybe I can play in Europe. And hockey's real big overseas, and I thought, well, maybe that's an attainable goal. I can play in Europe. Fast forward another year, and my next season at St. Cloud State, I ended up leading the country in scoring, and lo and behold, I had 5 or 6 NHL teams asking to sign me, and I was just blown away. And one of them happened to be the Boston Bruins, which was my hometown, and my hometown team that I grew up loving and wanting to play for. So I was lucky enough to be able to go do that. But with that, when I retired, I was 31 years old, like Gary was, and retired and moved to Carmel, Indiana, with my family, and to retire here. And it's a phenomenal city. I've loved every minute of being here, but really didn't know what I was going to do. I retired due to concussions, and at 31, I thought I was going to play another 5, 6, 7 years, which I'm sure we all did, right? And was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and did some different things, got into real estate, and did a lot of different things, but I always loved food. I always loved the food business. I grew up in a big Italian family that we did Sunday family dinners together. My uncle used to sell seafood out of the back of a truck, and when I got to Indiana, there was no real great seafood restaurants in town as far as what I believe a great seafood meal is. And Ocean Air is wonderful what they do, but they're white tablecloth. Ocean Prime is wonderful what they do, but it's white tablecloth. If anyone here has been out east, and Brandon, you can probably speak to this, there's a restaurant group out there called Legal Seafoods, and there's 38 of them on the eastern seaboard. It's one of my favorite restaurants, but it's a casual fine dining experience, and I wanted to bring that to the city of Indianapolis and bring something different and bring some of my childhood back here. So that's what I started out to do. I had some great partners that came to me a couple years ago and said, let's put together some concepts and let's do something together. And I spent about the last year and a half researching and going out east and figuring out what I wanted to do. Met with some of my family members who are fishermen in Maine, commercial fishermen, and was able to put this concept together. And it's going to be called Pier 48 Fish House and Oyster Bar. And we signed our first lease in September with Thompson Thrift to put our first location up at the Yard in Fishers. And literally about a week after I signed that, Ryan Smith, who works with Thompson Thrift, called me and said, "Are you guys working with any brokers?" And I said, "No." I said, "I'm just kind of going out looking at spots myself and kind of doing it on my own. I know I have a little bit of a real estate background, so I kind of sort of know what I'm doing." Well, he introduced me to a young man named Andrew, and we went and had lunch and started talking about kind of our goals as a group and what we wanted to do. And I told him I really wanted to get involved in the city. I wanted to be downtown if possible. We wanted to grow our concept kind of in the Midwest. And he said, "Hey, that's great. Let me do some work." This was a Friday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon when we were talking. By 5:30, 6 o'clock that night on a Friday night, Andrew called me and said he had 5 locations downtown to take a look at. And I looked at my girlfriend and I said, "Well, this guy's working hard." And one of them happened to be the new Hyatt hotel that's opening up across the street from Banker's Life. And I'm looking at Andrew going, "There's just no way we're going to get this. We're a brand new company. We're a brand new concept. I've got background in the city with some other restaurants I've done, but there's just no way that we're going to get this." Well, fast forward a couple of days, and they got our business plan, and next thing you know, we got awarded the space, which I feel like is one of the premier spaces in all of Indianapolis, being as close as it's going to be to Banker's Life and Georgia Street and everything else that's going on downtown. So really fortunate, super excited about it. We want to grow our company. I take a lot of, Gary probably doesn't know this, we've never really met in person, but I follow Gary on social media, and a lot of the things that you talk about every day speak volumes, and it's been something that I've really thrived off of and really put into place and building my company. And he's 100% right. The sports world and what we're doing as restaurateurs is very, very similar. Everything that I talk to my team about is teamwork, it's family, it's what can we do today better than we did yesterday. Everybody always asks me, what do I miss about playing hockey? And I'm sure these guys will say the same thing. I miss the locker room. I miss being around my buddies, right? So what kind of an atmosphere can we create within our organization so that our employees feel that same way? I want my employees to feel like when they walk in the door that it's their locker room, and we're a family, and we can have fun, and we can goof around, and we can have a great time and give the best possible hospitality service to our guests, so that they feel like they're the most important people when they walk in the door. And I believe that will continue to make us more successful. So that's where I'm at with it, and super excited.
Making me hungry, man.
Yeah, so I appreciate it. But I want to thank you guys for having me be here, and this has been wonderful. So we're excited to be a part of Indianapolis, and we're going to continue to grow and do some different concepts as well. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you. All right, Brandon, both these fellas hinted at it. It's, I would say, unlike no other profession that between 30 and 40, you're usually done. You were staring that decision. Obviously 4.0 at Purdue. You may have seen some other people make not so good of choices. Just give me your history of how you decided to get into Marco's franchises and kind of how that all came about.
Well, I want to thank Courtney first of all, because I hope that 4.0 thing kind of just sticks the rest of my. Hopefully that sticks with me the rest of my life. So did get an engineering degree though, so you were half right, man. Interesting. I was listening to these two gentlemen talk, and obviously, Gary and I have known each other for a long time. Interesting. When we were, I guess. We were both in the NFL. We took advantage of opportunities that the NFL presented that were for business development or different things throughout our career. And so Gary and I would meet up in the summer or whenever these times were, whether it was at Wharton or Harvard or these different opportunities that the NFL provided for us. And so didn't know Gary, but we always knew each other from that side of it. We never played together. So, and then Fred, I'm looking forward. When you said legal seafood, I was kind of getting excited, man. It's like, when's that coming in? To go back to my background, it's funny. I always tell this story. It's kind of a rich dad, poor dad story. If anybody's ever read the book, one of my parents are both educators, hence the 4.0. So both educators, but my best friend growing up, his father was an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. He owned Dairy Queen's, right to Dairy Queen, Skyline Chili's here in the city. When I got done playing, I kind of reached out to a group of mentors, I guess you call them, that I had that were involved in business in central Indiana. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did know that I didn't want to go into corporate America. I kind of had some experiences doing some different things with that. And I knew that wasn't going to be me. And so whether it was real estate, or I met with some guys about real estate, I met with some people about some restaurant industry, some franchising. And so I remember this gentleman, he told me, he said, Brandon, he said, you have always been really good about following the game plan and just doing it better than most people. That's what, basically playing professional sports or playing any sport is. Everybody gets the same game plan, but you've been better at doing that. And said franchising will be very similar to that from that aspect. And so what he didn't tell me is that the restaurant industry would be as hard as it was going to be. But he did tell me about franchising, and so I just started looking into Marco's Pizza, and I really got involved. And ironically, Courtney, as Courtney said earlier, he was on that same path as well, and so I really just enjoyed kind of looking at it. But as these guys both alluded to, now that I've been involved in it now about 7 or 8 years, my pleasure comes from different aspects of being involved in it. And so I remember I had a coach that was when I was in New England Patriots, and similar to how Gary was talking about his career in the NFL, I started out in San Diego and I got cut. And this will be a funny story for you guys in the room. I walk into my rookie year, I got drafted with Drew Brees, and Drew Brees and I played college ball together. And so go into the locker room, and my quarterbacks at the time were Drew Brees, Doug Flutie, and Jim Harbaugh. And I'm not that old either. So, but Doug Flutie, Jim Harbaugh, and Drew Brees. And so, but I remember I had a coach out there, and he told me one time, he said, Brandon, I believe in you more than you believe in yourself. And, obviously when somebody says something like that, you're thinking, how the hell, what are you talking about? There's no way. You don't believe in me more than I believe in myself. And as I've transitioned now into being in a role of leadership, and as you guys said, the team mentality, I see what he meant by that. I sense it every day. So my team members, the people that I'm around, the people that I get the opportunity to lead, I believe in them sometimes more than they believe in themselves. And it's my job as a leader to provide that inspiration in them. And that's what brings me more joy now than any aspect, I guess, of doing anything else. And so, and on another note too, ironically, as I've been involved in this business as well, I've learned a lot and got to meet a lot of individuals out there in Central Indiana. And I had no idea about commercial real estate. I had no idea about running a business. I had none of this. And so it's been interesting to continue to learn and develop and grow myself. And at this point, like Gary was alluding to earlier, it is me against me, and I'm driven every day to kind of constantly improve. And I need to start following you on, what are you on, Instagram? What is on everything. On everything? Okay. All right. I need to start following Gary, I guess. But so it's been a transition for me, and to continue to learn and develop as we all. But I get driven now to kind of improve, and so that's was my time being involved with Marco's. It's kind of just a vehicle now that I'm just riding.
Outstanding. Give them all a round of applause. Appreciate you guys hanging with us. I know it's we're over the 6:30 mark, but I want to open it up to 1 or 2 questions. Who has questions for any of these athletes pertaining to their careers, franchises? There we go.
All right, I don't want to be a 2-question guy, but if nobody else.
Go for it.
This is a real question. First of all, thank you for everything that you do for the city. But on like a Friday night at 11 p.m. or like a Sunday at 5 p.m., how do you not order a Marco's Pizza when you own the franchises? Like, is it hard to not? Because I know I would every time.
That's a good question. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. You're supposed to order. You're right. You are. I do order it every time. It kind of going back to what I was saying about you against you. If I do that, I won't be able to be I won't show up the best. And so I'm on the game plan now, trying to look like a basketball player for my rest of my life instead of a football player. That's what Gary said earlier. So
he just lost like 50 pounds, 60 pounds. So I don't know if he's eating Marco's Pizza.
We came out with a new calorie-free crust. You can try it.
Real does not endorse any of these statements made today. We got one question over here.
For Gary, I know that you're very active on social media. That's obviously kind of geared towards especially the new millennial generation. Obviously, speaking of a group of real estate professionals, can you kind of describe how you see how social media can be a platform for real estate to be able to grow organically as well as to help the younger generation better business overall?
The question was, Gary, how do you see social media being used to grow your business as well as improve best practices?
Yeah, so I think if you're a young professional I don't think there's no longer excuses. I didn't know that someone would look on my Instagram, on my Snapchat, and think that you're kind of in this bubble that, you know, no one's gonna find me because I put cool beans in front of my first name, and somehow, you know, that's gonna hide me on the internet, right? So I think, so with that mindset, you should also think that you can be a multiplier of yourself and your brand if you use social media correctly, right? And I don't know how many guys listen to Gary Vee in the room, right? But I think he hits the nail on the head when he talks about this. The time that we in right now is the greatest time ever. You can overnight create an internet business with no capital and produce $1 million this year. And it's about your consistency, and it's about your value add. You don't get paid what you're worth, you get paid what type of value you create. So when you're thinking about social media, my value is inspiration, it's motivation, right? It's tactics, right? We're in the process now, me and my guy in the room, we're creating a champion mentor academy on the internet. Why? Because e-learning is hot. So I had two decisions. I could be a public speaker, which I am, and I go make pretty good money to speak out for an hour. So you're welcome for doing this for free. Thanks. Right? Yeah. Or I could create an online course and sell it globally, right? And guess what? Once I sell it and I put it on automation, it's there forever. And that's the power of social media. But I wouldn't be able to do that, I have an opportunity to do that, if I first didn't build a brand and I first wasn't consistent. Every morning I wake up, it was of rule of the day, and it changed to a clue of the day because now I have a podcast, Success Leaves Clues, right? And all that's been intentional about what I do. And it's funny, 4 years ago, I can remember I was posting every day, right? And I don't know, 3 likes, 2 likes, right? And I'm just posting just because that's how I feel that day, right? It's not for anyone else. It's Instagram. You're supposed to post something. So here it is, right? So I can remember I was at an NFL event, and someone came up to me and he pulled me off to the side. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Like, I ain't lending out no money, right? No hard money lending going on, right? I heard these stories before, but he was choked up, and he was like, man, I want to thank you. And I'm like, what? I win you some money during the game when we beat the Patriots? Like, what's going on? What you thinking of me? But he was like, nah, I want to thank you because you saved my life. And I was like how? Like explain. And he was like, man, one morning I woke up and I was convinced I was gonna kill myself. I was gonna commit suicide. I wrote the letter. I was gonna commit murder, right? And then he said, I woke up and I checked my phone and your Instagram post, and it said, you asked for help not because you're weak, but because you want to remain strong. He said, at that moment, I called the crisis hotline and I got help. And right, amazing story, right? So if you're posting, if you got a good message out there, you can change someone's life, right? So that's why I view my social media as, adding value, positioning myself, because in this day and age, it's just amazing me like how many people still aren't using their social media as a tool. It's a weapon, right? And now it was free, right? I can't say it's free anymore. You have to pay to play. But you have to understand how to strategically place your ads on Facebook, understand SEO and how writing blog and long form content will get you seen, right? How Google AdWords, if you do the right keywords that aren't crazy high bid, something that's reasonable, can like put you in front of your consumer. And all that stuff matters, and if you understand that, you don't have to spend $1,000 on billboards, right? And all this other traditional media, because you can win in the digital space. So I've learned that, I created that, we committed to that. So that's really my strategy on how I'm gonna continue to build sales at Stack Pickle, and also heighten my personal awareness and really just add value to people in their lives.
To that point about knowing what you're doing, Gary Vee said my ROI on a basketball is two broke knees. LeBron's is $1 billion. Same goes to Facebook and social media. I think, where is it? Oh. Corp.
Absolutely. I just wanted to know from you guys that have played professionally, what are some of the things that you've taken from being a professional directly into business? Because I know a lot of things that
Question was, what have you taken as your time as a pro into your current businesses?
I've taken a few things. One is fear of failure. I don't want to fail, even though any business you get into, some of the best learning experiences are when you fail, but that's one of them. Secondly, I think it's just work ethic. Both these guys have talked about putting in the work every day, getting up every morning and having a goal, having a strategic goal in mind of what you're going to accomplish today. And for me, when I was playing hockey, it was the same thing. Once I realized in college that I could maybe make a living playing a sport, it changed my whole mindset. And same thing with the restaurant business. Once I realized that this is something I was passionate about, it changed my mindset and made me work harder. So for me, it's work ethic, and then secondly with that is just teamwork. Overall, bringing people together for a common goal. And if you can do that, you can be successful in anything you do. So for me, that's what it is.
Yeah, so for me, I think it was just decision making, right? In football, I have to make a decision with the information that's presented to me, right? Whether or not I like it, or not, I have to decide to do something, right? The ball is getting snapped. You cannot stand in place.
You got to read the guard, man.
You got to read the guard, right? But you read your keys, you study, right? You understand. And I think so many people in business, right? They're standing still, and their answer is, "Oh, I'm waiting for this to be perfect," right? And it never will be. And so many people never get going, right? Because they're afraid to make a mistake. Well, guess what? You're gonna make a mistake, and if you're not trying hard enough. So I've learned in my business, with the information that I have presented in front of me, I gotta make a decision. Right? I can't sit on that information any longer. So many people sit on the information and won't do anything. It's like, no, you have 80% of the information. The other 20% won't be revealed to you until you first do something with that 80. So it's like, what's the escape rooms? Right? So many people want like the fifth clue, like, I want to get out. Well, guess what? Answer the first clue. Right? But I still want to get out. Guess what? You have a second clue. Right? You don't get the clue 5 until you get the clue 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's about making a decision with the information that you have, right? And then looking for that further knowledge once you get there.
I'd say it's a little different for me, not different than what Gary or Fred said, but it's not about what I've taken from my professional career. I actually would say what I know is missing. And all of you guys are probably like what I would call like solopreneurs, even though you may work for a company. If you're in real estate, I happen to know Andrew as well. Andrew works with me, and so these guys are solopreneurs, right? Entrepreneurs are kind of on their own, and so what was missing is, as I got done, and I'm not doing a job anymore, although you might have considered a job, you might get paid by somebody else, is the structure. And so one of the things that I always say that was the difference between me playing for the New England Patriots, and I'm not saying the Colts didn't have that, but I was going to say what they do have with the Patriots is that they had a structure. And so I played on some other teams as well, and everybody wanted to win. We wanted to win every game. We had talent everywhere we went. And so, but there wasn't a structure and a system in place that supported that goal, or at least not high enough. And so that's why the Patriots continue to have the success that they do, because they have a structure. And as you get out, as you guys are all out, we call civilians. You guys all have to be able to create that same structure. And as a solopreneur, nobody's going to tell you what to do. Nobody tells you guys out there what to do every day. At least I don't think so. And so it's up to you to kind of figure out that structure for yourself. And so that's what, again, I didn't take it from my career, and it was missing as I got out, and until you can kind of figure out the right way to do that for yourself, because nobody's going to be driven. It's going to be you, and you get to decide how it's going to go. And that's the most difficult thing, but it's also the most liberating thing if you can do it successfully.
I'd like to add to that real quick. All right. Real quick. And what you're saying too, and it's being proactive versus reactive, right? When you retire at 31 years old, I mean, you have your whole life ahead of you. And I know for me, it took me about 3 years to really get my head out of my ass and realize, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? I was so depressed because I didn't have that structure, so I needed to get proactive. and that was a big part of it. Just get up, be proactive every day, and that goes into our businesses too. You know, especially in the restaurant business. The restaurant business can eat you up if you're reactive. If you're proactive in everything that you do, in other words, you're setting up your staff, your leaders to be successful. I look at every single shift in our restaurant as game day. So in the morning when we get into work, what do? We get ready for the game. We go over our game plan. We're proactive on what's going to happen, so that at night when everything starts flying, we can react to the situation much better, much quicker, and in a much better way, because we've done our studying, we've done our game film, we've done everything we had to do that morning, that day before, and our managers meeting. So proactive versus reactive is another thing that I really believe in as well.
I give these guys a big round of applause. I know we went a little long, but how could you cut any of these guys off? Thank you guys. This was awesome, and I appreciate all of you guys sticking around with us. Comedy shows at 8 o'clock. If you want to buy tickets, those are still available. If you want to join Reel, indyreal.org, free to sign up, and share us on the socials. Do you have one?
Yeah, I just wanted to run a quick plug real quick. So to tie everything in that we talked about today into what we do professionally, whether you're a broker, investor, or developer. You know, for example, you guys mentioned Andy Clifford. You know, Andy coincidentally actually represents two of the companies on this panel, both Fred and Brandon. And you know, I don't know how many deals you've done for Marcos, but you know, I know myself have been many. You know, just to show how integrated we are with guys such as yourself that are former pro athletes. You know, Real was built upon that awareness for people that are, you know, getting into the industry and trying to find their way in the industry. It's difficult. It's difficult to navigate. And so that goes to show that as long as you persevere that first 2 or 3 years, you can obviously make it over that hump. And you know, appreciate everybody coming tonight. And that's about it.
You might win a Super Bowl.